playing devil's advocate, though, a lot of those in the Republican Party are saying, if cases were going the way that Democrats or liberals wanted them to go, then this would be a non-issue. Nobody would be talking about court reform. Nobody would talking about replacing justices every couple of years or having 18-year term limits. So I know you've been in this game trying to advocate, again, no matter which party is in power, trying to advocate for a reform of, again, a court that doesn't really have any oversight like other areas of our government. But is there some credence to that argument that nobody would care about this if the Voting Rights Act hadn't been gutted, if
Sure.
Roe versus Wade hadn't been overturned?
Yeah, I mean, look, I take the long view of this, and in every generation, since the start of the country, there's been an effort to reform the court in one way or another. I mean, whether or not, go back into, you know, Thomas Jefferson trying to reduce and then expand the number of justices. Similar things happened around the Civil War. In terms of the docket that changed in 1893, 1911, 1988. There's been efforts to change the makeup of the court for a while. And from a term limits perspective, that really got started not because of the jurisprudence of the court, but because between 1994 and 2005, we were in, and it was by a few days, so we'll just call it the longest, the second longest or the longest periods in U.S. history when there was no turnover on the court. That's really what kickstarted, at least in my view and my thinking. I'm just talking as one person, I guess. But when in 2005 there was a really 2006 there was a forum talking about and obviously 2005 Roberts comes in, 2006 Alito comes in, but in 2006 there was a forum at Duke Law talking about do we need to reconsider life tenure. And so that lack of turnover and that superannuation of the court is really what, and it wasn't the jurisprudence. Maybe some of the, there were liberal professors there were conservative professors there. That's really where the 18-year term limit became popularized. It had, existed in law review articles since time immemorial, but it really got caught on in 2006. So it was really this issue of just not having turnover at the court. And further, one of the other sort of stars of that period was an article by a law professor talking about mental decrepitude in the Supreme Court. And those are the words that he used. And he found research that suggested that, again, in every generation, every 20 or 30 years since the start of our country, a justice has been cognitively declined. And this is, I think we would have seen that with several of our justices who, whose physical health gave way before their mental health. We're looking at you, Rehnquist, Ginsburg, and Scalia. But, talking about Marshall and Brennan and McReynolds. And I mean, every generation there was a justice that had mental decrepitude. And so that to me is more than the jurisprudence, frankly, why I want a Supreme Court that has term limits, because frankly, judges and justices who have so much power over us should not be serving until they're 120.
It definitely seems anti-democratic to those who are advocating for term limits, and really a majority of the country who are not really pleased with a lot of the ways things are going and do feel that there needs to be change. And how would this be, though, enforced in terms of especially the ethics code and things like that? Obviously, term limits would be something that would be regulated, but if again you said the sort of soft sell is, well, at least we need an ethics code, which a lot of people might feel isn't going far enough. But what enforcement mechanisms do we have when the Supreme Court is basically holding a lot of the power on its own?
Yeah, I mean, look, this something that I've always said on this is look at the justice's budget. Frankly, if I've been trying to push this, I have had moderate levels of success that, at least a few senators have introduced amendments to this effect. But the Supreme Court gets $150 of taxpayer money each year. About $4 million of that is required to go to them under the Constitution because their salaries cannot be diminished during their time in office, and that includes senior justices as well. And then we've got about $50 to $70 million of that being security funding, which obviously you don't want to touch given this era of political violence, which is unfortunate, but obviously you're not going to touch that. So that leaves another about $75 million, up maybe even up to $100 million, that is discretionary, that goes to paying the justices for clerks that they get each year to write their first drafts of opinions and sit on the cert pools. That goes to them having catered lunches and hosting receptions in the Great Hall. That goes to support staff and research staff and judicial assistants. And I'm not trying to, lay off a bunch of government employees, though I'm sure there would be some both on the left and the right who would want to do that. But what I'm saying is that their budget, besides the Article 3 stuff and the security, is not sacred. And if you want to have enforcement, say, look, if you don't create a system where there's enforceable ethics, where there's a committee where you can file a complaint against a justice, just like you can file a complaint against any of the 2,300 other federal judges for ethics noncompliance. If you don't create those structures, then we're going to take away some of your discretionary budget. And Senator Van Hollen of Maryland introduced an amendment last year to the appropriations bill that would do that. $10 million would be taken away until they have enforceable ethics. That didn't pass, but I think it's worth to keep trying, because frankly, the power of the purse is the one thing that Congress can sort of dangle over the court in a way that might lead to their getting serious about their ethics practices.
Well, many are continuing to try, and there are a lot of new ideas coming out, and there's more momentum behind this. And Gabe, you are the go-to expert on this. You've been in the trenches on this issue, so hopefully a lot of your ideas will be adopted and come to realization, and you will be able to say, this is what I've been saying, and I told you so. And we're all better off for it.
Yeah, few things. I enjoy a few things more than being able to say "I told you so," which is definitely a huge character flaw on my part. But I'm not changing it in this day and age.